There it is.
Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us at Watch for Miracles. I'm Pat Kramer, the author of two wonderful books about extraordinary experiences that happened to ordinary people called In the Hands of Angels and 911 to Heaven. And we're very excited today to have a topic for you that's presented in one of the chapters of In the Hands of Angels. There's a chapter about near-death experiences, which has 12 stories from people who went to the other side, or so they tell us. And I feel very fortunate to have a guest today that has a story in that chapter. It is an absolutely extraordinary account. And something that I think is going to touch your hearts in the most amazing way. I have with me Dr. Edward Anthony Colozzi, and he is someone I have known, admired, respected for more than 40 years. I'm going to tell you a little bit about his background because he's quite the pioneer in the field of career development. So I wanted you to know a little bit about the uh, background, the knowledge that he brings to our discussion today. So Ed is an educator, a trainer, an author. He's been a classroom teacher, been a counselor, and he's worked in staff development for both the government and for private industry and for education, as well as higher education. Ed has an interesting background because he is the person who reframed our view of a career as paid work to a much more powerful, much more inclusive paradigm that he called career life. He did this back in the mid 70s, and he was trying to show the reality that happens for adults, which is they have, and youth, they have multiple roles that they are juggling simultaneously. He's written and taught on quite a variety of topics, including personality, work and life role, environment assessment, values clarification, actually core values clarification, which is the deepest part of us. He refers to that by an acronym called DOVE. It shows the importance of the role of spirituality in discovering our meaning, our purpose, discerning our calling or callings. He's done transition, development, wellness, mental health, and really someone who's always tried to focus on career and life balance. To put that into practice in the world, Ed has done some amazing volunteer efforts that have gone all the way from K, you know, literally grade school, K-12, up through graduate education. He worked with religious services and reentry departments at FMC Downs in Massachusetts. That's a person from Christian men, 17 years older. He facilitated a contemplative prayer meditation group every week at St. Mary's in Winchester, Massachusetts. That's where he comes to us today from Massachusetts. Ed's education is bachelor's from Boston University, both an MA and an MEd from Columbia University, and also a PhD in higher education from Columbia University. So I think you'll agree this man has quite the background from which he's going to speak to us today. And I think you'll find some of his discussion to be something will change your thoughts, to change the way you think about spirituality. So want to take a minute to say hi, Ed, let you greet everybody.
Thank you, Pat, very much. And it's an honor to be here with you, my dear friend, and also a researcher who really has taken time and effort to talk to so many people from different walks of life, including myself, and write books about that and do research interviews with them, and also now do podcasts, which is um, so excellent. And I'm humbled to be here with you, and also I'm grateful that my story can be shared through you, Pat, via this podcast and your writings, and of course that of many other people. So I really send a warm aloha nui. I used to live in Hawaii for a number of years. Um, and to you, Pat, and also all your listeners and readers of your books. Thank you.
So, our topic today is about something that happened to Ed when he was just 18 years old. He had an experience that absolutely changed the course of his life. It was so profound, so unexpected, and so deeply personal that he never spoke about it for more than 25 years. What he's going to talk to us about today is why that changed, why he finally shared that, what the impact of that was. He's a very blessed to have had this in the first place, as well as to then be letting us share it with him. Ed has asked, by way of special request, that I go ahead and read that story for you so that you will all experience it together. Because if he just talks about elements of the story, it doesn't resonate in the same way as if you hear it exactly as he wrote it and exactly as it happened to him. So I ask you to sit back, take a breath, allow yourself to listen to this account with curiosity, with an open heart. And I thank Ed for his courage and openness and wanting to share it with us today. So here is a near afterlife experience that happened at an afternoon lunch that opened a door to a different dimension. I was 18 years old and a freshman at Boston University and was enjoying a late afternoon lunch at my parents' home when I experienced a spiritual encounter so powerful I did not share it with anyone until 25 years later. Four of us were at the large family dining room table. My mom on my left at the end, my dad to the right at the opposite end, and their guest seated opposite me in the middle. Mom had made an Italian meal, starting with a homemade Italian soup with tiny meatballs, which was a special treat that our family enjoyed several times a year. When we each had our soup, she sat down and asked Dad to say grace, which he did. My parents engaged in conversation with their guest as they enjoyed their soup. I swallowed 1 tablespoon of that delicious soup and started to put my spoon into the bowl for another when I felt my head very slowly sink directly toward the bowl on the table. I was totally conscious, not feeling ill at all. My last clear thought included some humor, as I noticed the soup bowl was now only about 5 inches from my sinking face. And I thought, if I keep going, my face is going to be right in this soup. I must have lost consciousness then, because I have no memory of actually landing in the soup. To this day, my next crystal clear memory was seeing an extremely bright white light surrounding me, but not causing my eyes to squint. Simultaneously, I felt with all my senses, my cells and nerves, my body, mind, and spirit, a safe and deep feeling of total peace, silence, and an overwhelming, authentic, powerful presence of unconditional love surrounding me. It was unlike anything I had ever experienced. I could clearly see four small spiritual beings, possibly my guardian angels, whom I will now simply call beings. They were gathered in a half circle in a group next to me on my right, with three of them closer to me, and the fourth slightly farther, behind the farthest one on the left side of those three. I was about 5 feet 10 inches tall, and remember these beings were shorter, maybe 5 feet 6 inches tall. And I remember they each wore similar hooded robes made of soft white cloth that covered all their bodies and the tops of their heads, leaving only their full faces visible to me. I saw no specific indication of male or female gender. They each had pleasant, warm, caring expressions as we gazed at each other. Initially, they seemed to speak to me in unison, telepathically, with no lip movements. Yet I heard only one clear voice as I was looking at their eyes and closed mouths. They said, "You have nothing to fear or worry about. You are safe." And I distinctly remember responding confidently yet telepathically, "I know that." I felt that communicating this way, oddly enough, seemed completely normal. I looked down from where I was standing, or perhaps more accurately, was suspended in air, close to the top of the high ceiling in the dining room. I seemed to be about 5 feet above my own body. I noticed my physical body was lying on the floor, several feet to the right of the chair on which I had been sitting while eating the soup. My feet were close to the table, and my head angled towards where my father had been seated. I assumed when I became unconscious, and probably did land with my face in the soup, my dad pulled me off the chair and dragged me to the floor near where he had been sitting. I did not hear any voices or sounds from my family below, yet I could strongly feel my parents' acute fear for my welfare. I saw my dad, an OB/GYN doctor, kneeling over my body on the right side, checking my mouth and listening for a heartbeat to see if I had choked on something. My mom stood opposite him on my left side with great concern on her face. The guest standing on my dad's right observed all of this with clear concern on his face as well. Then one of the beings closest to my right invited me to look down at my body lying on the floor and said telepathically, but which I heard as a real voice, "You have a choice. You can stay here with us or go back there." I remembered two distinct realizations and strong feelings: the gravity of my choice, and that it truly is my free will choice to make. As I looked down at my body and that entire scene, I responded telepathically without moving my lips or looking at any of those beings, and clearly, confidently, and truthfully declared, "I want to be here. I have something very important to do." And I meant back there. With those words, I lost sight of the four beings and instantly heard a loud sucking sound like air and water being sucked into a giant water spout, and I felt myself physically pulled downward and back into my body. It seemed to last several seconds and just stopped. What happened next was even more powerful. I became acutely aware of cacophony, the jarring noises on this plane that we call Earth. It was so different than the deep, quiet, and peaceful experience I had just left. It was more chaotic than the usual sounds we hear, like music, televisions playing, people talking, laughter, cars passing, barking dogs, fire engine or police sirens, birds, wind chimes, or even rain with thunder and lightning. Maybe I was hearing or feeling sound waves not normally noticeable, such as high frequency ultrasonic sounds or lower decibels. I don't know why, but it was very disturbing and just a barrage of noise. I've often wondered if I might have been hearing light rays, if that's even possible. Then all of that loudness suddenly stopped. It was very quiet now. My eyes opened as I heard my dad's voice. He was kneeling beside me, asking if I was okay as he noticed my eyes opening. I heard my mom asking me the same question. I felt fine and was easily able to stand up. Mom asked me if I wanted to lie down upstairs, and I said no, I was fine. She then asked if I wanted to eat something, and again I said no because I wasn't hungry. They seemed perplexed about what they had witnessed, and yet they saw that I seemed fine. I said I just needed some air, and I went outside to reflect alone on what had just happened. I vividly remember walking out the front door to the end of the front entrance walkway. It was about 12 yards long, with two stucco ledges facing each other at the end next to the front sidewalk. I sat on the right ledge, gazed at the lawn, took a deep breath in, and exhaled. I felt a deep sense of awe mixed with confusion, and I uttered to myself, "What the hell was that all about?" My parents had a battery of tests done, including an EEG, to determine if they had a stroke, an epileptic seizure, or something else. I had to take medication because one doctor thought I had a seizure, despite my parents saying no such activity occurred while I was unconscious. I eventually stopped taking that medication because there was no evidence, and to this day, never has been, of any physical illness. I went on to Teachers College, Columbia University for graduate degrees, and then moved to Hawaii. I never shared that experience with anyone, even on the many trips that went back to visit my family in Massachusetts. However, I often reflected on it, continuing to have distinct memories of every part of that day. No one was aware of that profound event in my life until a significant occurrence many years later. My dad was diagnosed with prostate cancer and two brain tumors. The prostate cancer was slowly progressing, but the brain tumors were progressing more quickly, which prompted several visits back to Massachusetts. And I often had to leave my wife and three young children back in Hawaii. One time I arrived unexpectedly, and when my mom saw me, she shouted, "Oh, Tony, it's Eddie. What a big surprise. I'll buzz you in." Lots of hugs and kisses were exchanged, and eventually we sat down in the small living room. Dad was in his pajamas and bathrobe and was rather reserved and quiet, but Mom was her usual outgoing self, very excited about my visit. My dad was clearly happy to see me, though, giving genuine smiles and making various comments. But he looked tired, somber, even had a mixture of resignation, sadness, and a sense of hopelessness, helplessness, and worry. Also, maybe at some level, an element of fear. I had expected to see and feel this because I knew he was in the initial stages of the dying process. He also knew that that was happening. My parents gave me an update on Dad's condition, and I responded with some news about Hawaii and the grandchildren. We finished all the small talk, and there was a silent pause. After several seconds, I looked at both of them and I said, "Can I share something with you?" And they said, "Yes." I finally related my long ago experience that day in the dining room that I had told no one about for more than 25 years. They both seemed amazed, even bewildered, and there was a pause. My mom asked, "Well, why didn't you ever tell us?" And I said, "Because it was so profound for me, I was simply unable to relate it to anyone else." She then asked, "So why are you telling us now?" And I hesitated. I then looked directly into my dad's eyes with much love and compassion, paused again briefly, and then said with a powerful, quiet confidence and an intensely deep knowing, "To let you know, Dad, that you have absolutely nothing at all to fear moving forward." He clearly got my message. Oh, that's quite the story, Ed. And you continue for a brief paragraph in the book saying that you now call this a near after-life experience rather than the most people ever does near experience. So you explain how that term into my home and why you think that saying this term you scribe is different than what people kind of think of as that more familiar near-death experience. Tell us more about that.
Okay. Yes. Thank you for reading that. It's for me, it's powerful. Um, I know I experienced it, but when I hear you read that, it was my what I call lived experience, and that's very meaningful. So thank you for reading that, Pat. It was very moving for me personally. Um, yes, that kind of experience is apparently, I didn't know it at the time, but I was only 18. But over the years, when some people were in the medical field were talking about this, or people had been on an operating table or in a car accident, they had some similar experiences as is shared in your two books. And often it's referred to as the near death experience. And I always thought it was the near death experience. And I happen to be a Christian. I'm Catholic, and I believe in an afterlife. And I have lots of friends who are different faith traditions, or some are atheists or agnostic. Um, and I've done workshops with a lot of these folks and different people, um, even from different countries. And I respect people's views about this, but as one people living in this planet where you're probably looking at the Earth behind me, which is a NASA um, picture that was taken. I believe when I was alive and younger, and many of your listeners are alive, so we're in that photograph behind me, I'm sure. Um, I I really believe we're all connected to God, or however one views that. And when people have had that experience, they've often framed it as a near after death experience. Um, and basically, I mentioned Tom Keating, which you put in the book, and Tom was an American Trappist priest. He basically was one of the three principal developers of what is called contemplative prayer or centering prayer. It's a form of prayer that is a receptive form of meditation versus a Buddhist approach or Hindu, which might be more concentrative, and you have a word and or you make a sound, om, and you try to quiet the mind that way. Uh, Centering prayer is more of a receptive approach, a prayer, and you do have a sacred word that brings you back to staying just in God's hands, however one wants to explain that. And when I got to know Tom, I actually started a centering prayer group in my parish, St. Mary's Winchester, which you had alluded to. And I did that for 17 years every Tuesday night. And initially, um, I he did eventually come to Boston. He was at Spencer Abbey, which is downtown Cambridge, for a while. And then he went back and became the head abbot at Snowmass, Colorado. And that's when I basically was told by a friend of his who gave a Catholic mass and talked about centering prayer. And I went up and I said, "Oh, I'd like to start this in my office and see who would like to come to this." And he said, "Call Father Tom up." So I called Father Tom up and we had a wonderful conversation and he put me in touch with some people. And eventually he visited Boston and we got together. And I've attended some retreats with him, a silent retreat. I've been to confession to him as a Catholic. Um, I've read some of his books that really enlightened me in some really important ways. And of course, I used his videotapes to run the support group and facilitated that with people in the Winchester, Woburn, Burlington area. One day, after he had done a retreat, he needed a ride to Logan Airport, and I volunteered to drive him. And on the way, he was hungry. We stopped and had lunch, and basically, I took the opportunity to share with him, which I had never shared before, my experience, which you just read. And he listened to me during lunch, and he listened to my verbal sharing, and and then I stopped, and he paused, and then I uh, saw him just pondering, and then he said, "Ed," he said, basically, he said quietly these words. He said, "Ed, what you experienced was a near afterlife experience," and we continued that conversation, and that resonated instantly. Just as he said it, I felt like a sigh. That's what that was. Absolutely. And I had never figured that out. I mean, logically, one would think, well, why not call it that? But you, when I was 18, I didn't know anything about this. And then as I got older, and you hear people dying, and you hear research, and people wake up after they had a heart attack in the hospital, and no wonder near-death experience comes. They're probably very similar in the context of whoever had the experience, even for me. But then when he said that, that just clicked with me. So for me, clearly it was a near afterlife experience, and I'll always see it as that. So
Well, it's interesting that you mention car accidents and hospitals. Of the 12 stories that I have captured in The Hands of Angels in chapter 9, you are the only one who has this type of experience that came spontaneously in the middle of a lunch and an afternoon. All of the other stories, people were in a car wreck. They had an operation. They had a sudden heart attack, a stroke. So
mm,
when people have had illness or trauma or something where their physical body is actually in danger at that moment where they
yes.
might physically die, that's to me it seems a little different than I don't feel you were going to die at that moment, but you did have this crossing over experience. So I'm wondering, at the very moment that you lost consciousness and you knew you weren't in the dining room anymore, what that felt like.
Well, yes, to your first set of comments, I believe it is that kind of experience is usually associated with something that's painful or traumatic or whatever. Um, and and I don't even remember my head falling in the soup, to be very honest. I was that close to it, like right there. I could see it. And as you said, and I told you this, yeah, I had humor when I was thinking, if I keep going down, my head's going to fall into that soup. And then it had to have fallen in. I have no recollection of that at all. And my dad was about probably 4 to 5 feet. It was a long dining room table. My mom on the left of me, my dad on the right, and then the guest right opposite me. So when he saw my face fall in the soup, he had to have come over thinking I was in distress. Obviously, I was in distress because my head fell in the soup. and he must have picked me up under the arms and dragged me, as you read, because that's my recollection of what probably happened once I saw myself 5 feet above looking at myself. I could figure out, well, that's probably what happened, but I have no recollection of a second before my face hit the soup and um, then suddenly being in this white light and an environment of powerful love and and then looking down and seeing my body and everyone, but not hearing any words, just noticing, as you said, what I had written, the angst of people. So for them, there was angst. I had no angst at all, and I want to go to your question. I think you're wondering what did I think your question was then, what did I just experience? Is that correct? Right? When I first
When
realized,
you got to the other side,
yeah,
how did how did you know where you were?
well, that's a great question. Um, I love your questions because it brings me right back to that experience. First of all, when I saw the white light, I wasn't afraid because the visual of the white light, and I didn't wasn't it was so bright, but I didn't even have to squint my eyes. Everything was white. And then that and the feeling of love, unconditional love with the white light. Um, I had not read books about this or seen movies about this or anything. So this was like a real experience out of the ordinary for me that way. And but I
Well,
wasn't scared.
especially at 18, you would probably at 18 have never read anything about that.
No, nothing at all. So so I felt safe. Felt safe and I felt love and I felt the love and the white light I saw and it just bursted burst right through me. It was just amazing. So then it was after that, it was a matter of probably 1,000, 1,000. That's it. I've had those feelings, the white light, I'm not afraid. And then the idea of seeing visually these three and four beings. I really know three were prominent, but then as I'm looking to my right, there's one right next to me, and then there's two more next to that. They look like angels. They were dressed in robes. Everyone heard the story now. Only see their faces. I don't know their gender. And then there was a fourth one on as you go around the semicircle that way, kind of at the end. So,
Be the supervisor.
well, I don't know because when they spoke to me telepathically, that was I wasn't even surprised because it I could do the same thing. So it was uh, it I said it was odd and yet it seemed totally okay and normal. So none of this surprised me really. I'm just in another plane, and this is what happens.
And clearly
And
it didn't frighten you. It didn't, you weren't
no,
surprised
no,
and you
not
weren't frightened.
not a speck of fear, Pat. Not a speck of fear. It was just intimate. It was a incredible intimacy with that other realm and with these beings. And so anyway, that's what I was feeling at that time. Probably lasted several seconds, all of what I just tried to explain.
So it seems, though, that the main element of this telepathic conversation was about this choice that they told you you had. I find that very interesting because while you have many consistent details that I've heard of in other stories, the white light is always there, the peace is always there, the love is always there. Um,
Yes.
and very often, I hear this description about being given a choice. And I think that is fascinating. And you have a whole perspective about what this choice means and then of course what it did for you. So I'd like you to talk more about that and how it affected then the rest of your life.
Yeah, that was huge, hearing those words, because I was already looking down at my body and telepathically I'm hearing them, and I'm clearly hearing, I heard them all as one voice, and I know this sounds kind of inconsistent, but to me it's consistent, that the angel right next to me was the lead speaker. I just knew that, whoever that angel was. I call them beings because, um, and I've never mentioned this to you, ever, but several years ago when I met a, a dear friend in an office that I had rented to do my counseling work and everything in Winchester. He heard I told him the story. This is after I had certainly told you. And and uh, he just said, I told him who I thought it was, my angels. I'm assuming I have no proof of that, but I have no other. He said, Ed, have you ever thought that could be the Holy Trinity, Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit? And maybe the one on the far right was the your guardian angel. I don't know. I don't know the answers to that. But when I heard the one next to me say, "You have a choice," I was looking at my body, and then when I made my comment, you can stay here with us or go back there, and I said, I something to the effect, I want to be here, and I'm looking down. I'm not looking at them or anything, but there's something very important I have to do back there. And it was only when I said back there, I didn't see them, I didn't hear them, and that's when that other experience happened. You know,
We'll talk about that noise and the jarring, but
okay,
uh, in a second. But um, it was instantaneous. The moment that you made your choice, your
yes,
dimensions shifted. You were clearly in some other dimension.
yeah,
That whole thing about looking down at your physical body is very consistent. I have heard that repeated many, many times where
right,
people talk about being up above, looking down at the physical body,
yeah,
but your physical eyes are down in that physical body. So clearly some spiritual understanding, some your spirit part of you is what is seeing that, which I kind of find it interesting because
it is
then
interesting. Yeah, it's
the
a knowing. It's a
spiritual body needs to have eyes. But anyway,
yeah.
that's very consistent, the looking down thing. So,
it-
but you just instantly were back into
Well, no,
that.
no, there was a process. Can I
Oh,
digress just briefly about
yeah.
something you're
No,
saying?
okay.
Your last question had to do with choice, and it was remarkable because I felt I had a choice. I had the choice. I know I understand God's will, but I knew I had something important. If they had said, well, Ed, wait just a second, before you go, what's so important that where you think you have to go, or however they would have responded to me. To this day, I remember that I had no idea. And only when I went back, and I'll tell you what I felt when I went back, after all these years, 25 years, um, I finally told someone, and my dad and mom, when he was dying of prostate cancer. But I really, I really felt the power of the choice that we all have a free will, and that's really important. And And I think a lot of your stories do have someone looking down upon the body. And I don't want to go here any more than that, other than to say this. I think um, there's another story I have that I had when I was in 20, probably 20, 425 in New York City, where a young man came into me and talked to me about it, his experience. And he wasn't in a moment of crisis at all. Um, and yet someone appeared to him and he was shocked, but appeared to him um, and and shared about what happened, why she had left, helped him understand and communicated to that young man who was probably 17, 18, um, about why she's sorry that it happened. So it wasn't, he saw this and he wasn't near death or anything. He just saw this image. And then I believe someone that I heard telling me something, which was for me a powerful story, and I shared that with you. Um, the power of that story, which at some point I think you're going to be reading or something, clearly for me to hear that idea of choice came out in that story, that just moved me powerfully because it was, I had a choice just like this other person you'll eventually tell your people had a choice. That will be, I'm assuming, in a book or a podcast. That was reaffirming for me enormously to hear that. I even feel emotion when I'm even thinking of that myself. So to go back now to your, I don't know what you're going to do, put it in a podcast or a book, but whatever it is, that I really want to hear that whole story, and I'm looking forward to hearing that. Um, when I looked down and I said the words, um, I want to, and I heard them, you can stay here or go back. I said, I, I want to be here, but I need to go back. Something very important I have to do. I lost 100% awareness of connection with them, the white light, everything, the feeling of safety. And I felt myself, as I wrote to you and you explained in your reading, this huge, um, I felt I was being sucked into something. I wasn't drowning, but I heard a sound like water and wind, like you said, I was a water spout. And then I could feel myself going back into my body. And the reason, the proof for me, my lived experience is that I then heard with these ears where I'm hearing you, and uh, I heard all these loud sounds. It was cacophony. I was hearing a dimension that if even if it was in a forest and it was quiet, I would still hear that same sound. On this plane and the earth, I heard a lot of these sounds that are going around us all the time, which was extraordinary to me. I kind of figured out that's what it was. And then with the eyes I'm seeing you now, uh, my eyes could see my dad leaning over me and checking my throat and doing whatever. And so I'm back in the plane and I felt myself being sucked back into my body. So
Well,
I, I guess that answers what I felt.
well, it does, and but I do want you to share with us a little bit then about how this concept of the choice affected you in your later years. Because then you're sure, you're 18 and you're starting to move through your adult life. So how were you always more conscious that you had a responsibility to do something? I'm just wondering how that played out in your life and career.
Sure, yeah.
Oh, you have to give us the short version of your life because you've done so much that the
Right,
long version of your life will take us quite a
yeah,
long time.
right, yeah. I Um, okay. I'm trying to give cliff notes here. Um, but I've had um, a couple of similar experiences, um, but not quite like that, where there was something going on and I intuitively didn't open the door to a car or something, or um, and I hesitated, even though my mother said, get out. And then I hesitated. Something said, don't open the door further. Don't listen to your mother, basically. And then the car came by and just knocked the door off the car. I could have been killed right there. So, and I think a lot of people have these things and
They
these
do.
experiences. So, to your point, um, and only if there's time I can share about some other stuff like that. But for now, um, choice. I, I, I was 18. I was so naive about so much in life, and basically, um, Pat, when I look back at my life clearly, some um, very compelling moments and people in my life that made a huge difference. So many of them that helped me grow and everything. Some of my teachers at Boston University, obviously, and um, some of my and at Columbia University and things like that, and uh, all sorts of people like that. But clearly, my parents and um, just being with them from 18 on and experiencing them in some wonderful ways, uh, and knowing them, and then making the decision to go to Columbia University on a whim. I mean, I did horrible in pre-med. My dad was OB/GYN, and I got into Columbia University, and I even rejected them, and 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 then I got into other graduate schools, and then I finally got a scholarship to go to Boston University, um, graduate school, and and I it's a whole other story I'm not going to go into, but basically I called up Columbia and I got myself reinstated. It was like the 3 days before I was supposed to meet with an advisor, so it was a very unusual experience. The Why that's important is I now went to Columbia University. I didn't go to BU or BC or some of those other schools. And and the only reason I applied to Columbia University because in about 20 seconds of walking past a good friend of mine in pre-med on a little crosswalk in the bottom of the College of Liberal Arts, you could either walk with all the students like fish going against each other to get out one door into another. You could walk in this little narrow path and see someone maybe you knew, and this here's a guy, Paul Greco, and how are you? And haven't seen you. You applying to graduate school? Yeah. Where are you going? Oh, Columbia University. Good. Where are you going? Well, B BU, BC, I applied to. Oh, Ed, you should apply to Columbia. We'll see each other. It was exactly that kind of instance. And I applied. I got in and I rejected them. And yet I then went back. That's a whole other story. But why is that important? That's how God, our angels, work with us. These little coincidences, they seem. Happenstance, some people call it. It's not a happenstance. It is a communication to us through our angels, our God, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, the Buddha within you, your Atman, Hindu, however God chooses to speak to you. It happens daily to all people. I'm not special at all. I'm special to God, but every one of you hearing this is just as special, maybe even more special than I am to God with crazy things that I've done and mistakes I've made. But basically, we're all special, and and we get those miracles. And the miracle of going to Columbia is then I met my former wife, a young Chinese woman who went with to teachers college, Columbia University, with 5 or 6 other women. And anyway, we dated and everything, and the other gals dated different people, and we ended up deciding to get married. And then I went to Hawaii for the first time and asked for her hand in marriage, and then I go back, and then we then go back and get married, and then we go back and we run a woman's dormitory in New York City, and eventually we have a boy, and we then had another little boy, and then when they were like 1.5 and 3 or something, um, uh, we decided, okay, I got my doctorate. Where do we live? Hawaii. Then I went back to Hawaii, and it was in Hawaii where I did a lot of my life's work and discovering career life from working with women in transition. We call them, they were displaced homemakers. I did a lot of things in Hawaii and a lot of volunteer work. And then sadly, I experienced going through a divorce, and my daughter asked me to raise her back here. And it was hard for all of us involved. And I came back with Kristen here. And then at that point, um, I actually then met Tom Keating and read some of his work. And everything fits in a way that is according to God's will, but we have a free will to go down a path that's probably easier. And most of us, including me, have gone down paths that I shouldn't have done that path, or I should have done this instead of that. We do have a free will. And then God
Yeah.
has a will for us, and that's what callings are all about. Does that make sense how I'm saying that?
Oh, what you're describing is the tapestry that we all weave with
Mm.
every day of the life that we live. And
Yes.
you are sitting here with me telling about these incidents that one led to the other, which led to accomplishing something that wouldn't have happened if you hadn't done that. But everybody listening to this, you have that same life tapestry. You have been guided, you have been offered choices, you have made choices that have led you down certain paths. And so it's just that beautiful thing, Ed, that we call life. So
Yes.
oh, well, I thank you for sharing some of those highlights, those moments of yours. They all, because of the impact, and you're too humble to truly brag on this, but because of the impact you've had on so many people and what they have done with their lives, because of the counseling, the career counseling
Mhm.
that you have done, the books that you've written, the individual sessions that you have guided people through. I don't know if you even ever stop to think about the thousands and thousands of people where you've had an impact on their life. So I know you would never brag about that, but that's why you came back. The choice gave you that opportunity then to have that kind of impact.
Well, I think you're right. And as you were saying it, because I know I'm your guest today, um, that would be true for a woman who had 4 children and never actually worked in a paid job and took care of those 4 children, and uh, and those children touch lives. That's how it all works. And yet a woman who has 1 child and then is a medical doctor or a first responder or a software engineer or whatever, CEO of an AI company. The, we all touch each other so powerfully. So even a homeless person, I've been touched by homeless people, and and I'm sure if you spend time, do I give $1 to this person, or I do $5, or I take this person out to dinner? Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. I have to try to be spirit led. But yes, everyone counts, everyone matters, even the incarcerated men I've worked with. It's like I get to have private time with them, and it's like I often feel like I'm in a confessional, and I'm not a priest, but I had been a licensed mental health counselor, and I've given that up, and I'm basically retired. But um, it's a very intimate moment, and they share things with me that they've never shared with anyone in or out of prison. So um, it's sacred, and the work
They,
people are sacred, and the work you do, and you have the opportunity to be a leader in any sphere of influence that you're in, whether you're a CEO or a counselor or a teacher or a mother or a father or a politician. We all have choices, and God's guiding us and trying to influence us. And are we looking here and trying to pray and do the right thing that's ethical, or are we kind of caught up with these other things in life, and we kind of miss miss that clear guidance, which would make it an easier path. But even in those hard paths, there's going to be lessons learned for everyone. And that's why your books and your podcast, I think, are really important, because it gives people pause to realize this can happen to anyone. And maybe I've had experiences like this. That's why I've read the two books, and there are so many interesting stories that actually it's things that we would say, well, what's a horrible thing for that woman to go through? And yet there was a blessing of that situation. And uh, and then years later something happened. And there's so many other paths we have. And that's why I'm not special. I'm as special as everyone listening to the podcast, and you. And look how we met. We're not going to go into that probably, but it was like within a matter of 30 seconds, and I would have walked away from that maitre d' who told me, oh, we can't take you for an early lunch. You have to wait 45 minutes. And you happen to be right there. Just by chance? No, by purpose. It's
after
all by
after look
purpose.
after looking back on the 40 years that intervened, I have no doubt in my mind that God designed that little intervention. That I cannot believe in just random happenstance occur. I don't believe in random coincidences. As I say in the 911 to Heaven book, that's the place where it starts. Coincidence is a partnership with the divine. Co
Yes.
means with, incident means happening. Coincidence is a happening with, where human and divine connect in a moment that makes a difference somewhere. So, well, we won't get into that. That's another story. But
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
as
That's
we come to
beautifully said, though. Yeah. And can I just add one thing? I put my hands like that. That's the connection. The thing is, we always have that when we're sleeping, when we're awake, when we're crying, when someone's having a baby, when someone is dying. We all have that continually. The human side here at planet Earth, I get up, I hit my head on the lamp, I trip, I fall, I get hit by a car. That's the physical plane we're in. It's a noisy plane, it's challenging, but it's a school, an opportunity to learn how to remember we're still like this always. So
I'm
what you
glad you
said was
reinforced
beautiful.
that. I'm glad you reinforced constantly. You always do. And everything you talk about, you always reinforce that theme of we are all connected, and we just have to keep remembering that because we do
Yes,
forget.
yes,
So as we come to a close, I want to go back to the final part of your story, where you finally reveal to your parents after 25 years that there is an incident that has meaning for your dad. That was so touching the way you wrote about that, and probably touched you as you listened to it, remembering that
um,
experience of being bonded with him in the living
yes,
room there. You were trying to express to him, we know you're dying, Dad, but don't be afraid. So
yes.
what was it like to finally speak those words to your parents, to send that message to your dad, and to know that it was probably going to make a difference in how he would approach his death?
Sure. He was very he was a spiritual guy, He delivered babies and gynecological kind of situations and things that were very joy-filled and very sad for all kinds of reasons. The doctors and nurses deal with this all the time. First responders do all the time. So he certainly was a man of faith. My mother was um, perceived by many as being very religious, but inside she was very spiritual, deeply spiritual. And um, and there's nothing wrong with being religious, but I think we may have talked about this. They often say the handmaid of um, um, religion is philosophy. It's about ideas, and they get passed on in books and everything. And of course, the Word of God. But of course, Islam has their word, and Hindus have their. It's a lot of stuff. It's ideas. It's passed on, but there's a commonality to all of these ideas, and and there's nothing wrong with ideas. It's how we interpret them and what we put a focus on. So, um, but the handmaid of spirituality is psychology, which is really the lived experience. I'm telling you about my lived experience. The books you have are people's lived experience. There's so much truth in that, regardless of whether they're Catholic, Christian, Jewish, Orthodox Jewish, Greek Orthodox, Hindu, atheist, agnostic. Um, it's amazing how God works, creates all of us, allows evolution to happen together with all that, and gives us all these wonderful experiences. So basically, um, when I told my dad, uh, we all knew he had it. I made several trips back and forth, and when I basically, Pat, um, got a call from my mom. I had already visited just maybe a couple of months earlier or a month earlier from Hawaii. Um, she said, he just, um, you need to get here quickly because he seems to be failing. He had been in the hospital already. He had two brain tumors and they couldn't really operate on that. So it was a matter of time. So when I got that call, I just had to go. So I literally left, packed a quick bag, and I said a rosary on the plane. And I just asked the Blessed Mother to please keep my dad alive. He could be dead by the time I get there. I have to rent a car. I'm not going to race too fast, but I'm going to get there. And, you have to land and then you have to get on the plane and everything. And I arrived, I rented my car, I drove directly to the hospital. And when I got there, he was in bed and my mother was with him and my sister had left, I guess. And I talked to him. He was awake and we talked and it was a good connection. He knew he was dying in the hospital now. Um, when I told him earlier in an earlier visit, it was very meaningful to him to hear those words. And I know he had some fear and trepidation. I could see it, I could feel it. And as religious as he was and spiritual as he was, um, I had dealt with death and dying with different people, even in Hawaii, but I had never told them this. Only after I told my father this experience and my mother did I then feel I could tell other people. And the first person I told um, after that was actually a uh, a nun who my father worked with, who was the head of the hospital. She passed on too um, at some point with a disease. So it calmed my dad. He got it, and um, my mother asked me the question. I looked at her. She was in her house coat. I told him the story, and she said, wow, how come you never said anything? And I said, it was so powerful to me. And then my mother, I'm still looking at my mom to the left, 3 feet away or so. Why are you telling us now? And then I looked directly into my dad's eye and I said what I had said, which you read, and you have nothing to fear about at all. And he got it. He got it. When shortly thereafter, um, might have been several months, I made that third trip or something after I prayed the rosary to keep him alive. He was alive, and I thanked the Blessed Mother, and I we had a nice talk, and he was weak, but he was cogent. We're having a discussion, and then I remember saying, "Hey, we're going to take Mom out to eat, Dad. Um, can I borrow one of your coats?" He said, "Of course." And I said, "Okay," and I kissed him and goodbye, and then my mother and I left, and we took my mom out to eat and for supper. When we got back, we had all the children, the spouses with us, who were living in Massachusetts. Um, my dad was in a coma, and he died 2 weeks later.
Oh,
So I was there holding his feet at the end of the bed when he passed, and I just wanted that connection with him to help him. You let him know I'm with you, Dad, because my sense he was seeing all this going on. And that's why when you're with someone who's dealing with the death and dying process, it was a life role I wrote about in 2011 and published. Um, One of the life roles. Uh, be careful what you say, because the ears are the last thing to go. And when you're around someone who's sick and something, say kind things and help them move on. If you want to go, feel free to go. Let go, let God. That's such an important thing to do.
oh, thank you. Thank you, Ed, for what you've shared with us here today. And I hope that people who listen to this will take away two important messages. Number one, that as we all of us approach death, it isn't something we should be afraid of. And before we get to that point, each of us has important things that we need to accomplish with our human life, to make a difference on this planet. So people can interpret what you told us today spiritually, symbolically. They can interpret it as some kind of mystery, but I think we all agree that there is a divine wisdom in the way that experience shaped your life, Ed. The gentleness, the purpose, the compassion that it brought out in you in all the days of your life that followed that. And I would ask that everybody listening pay attention to those moments.
Can
You
I say one thing? If I didn't say it, and I may have said it, and I don't want to reiterate, but um, you had asked me, what did I learn? And I said there was such profound things, and it really was. I learned so much 18 and later. I'm learning now at 81, but um, just um, meeting my wife and falling in love and having three children, a gift, a gift. I would go through my whole life again to repeat whatever mistakes I made, or to have whatever pains I had, or to do whatever, because that was so important to bring those lives through. And then with everything that followed that, the divorce and other relationships and teaching and counseling and new life experiences for me, I would go through all of that again to be where I am today, because it's all part of the divine plan, and it's about trying to listen more closely. And that's what I think your books do, and your podcast. It helps people realize I don't have to be a priest or a nun or a counselor or a doctor. I'm a human being. And whether I'm up and joyful or down in the dumps or depressed or angry or have some mental problems or drug problems or any kind of situation, I'm a human being, and God is here for me. That really is the power of your books, letting people know these are everyday people. They really are. And that's magical, and it's spiritual, like together.
Thank you. So I think that encourages all of us with those words, Ed. You're encouraging all of us to pay more attention to the moments of our lives and live them with more intention, more courage, and more
Mm,
love. Thank you so
absolutely.
much for being with me and sharing just some incredible thoughts with everyone who's listening. I hope that they will take away something meaningful for their own life.
God bless you, Pat, and namaste. I see God in you too.
Thank you.
Thank you.